What would you describe learning outcomes to be?
They establish what the purpose of your course is.
I think learning outcomes give students quite a bit of guidance.
I think that instructors probably put a lot of emphasis on it, and students probably don't pay as much attention as they should.
I would like students to use them a little bit more than they do.
They really give us a foundation for students to anchor what they're learning into the real world.
You've got something measurable at the end of the day, which indicates whether or not you've had some degree of success.
It's not until you actually put it in practice that it all makes definite sense.
Do you pay attention to them at the beginning of a course?
No, not really. It's something that's not necessarily stressed enough as it should be.
I don't think they pay that much attention to them.
Ask me to quote them and I wouldn't necessarily know.
Some of them are very general, some of them are very specific.
They need to be adjusted starting in the curriculum.
I think that they're crucial.
But I hear faculty complain about them a little bit.
You know, sometimes we just make it too difficult.
I think it could be a little more straightforward.
Once you clarify that outcome, just draw the map backwards.
As a student, what is your opinion of learning outcomes? Are they important to you?
I think they are, because I whenever I start a course, I would like to see what are the proposed learning outcomes. Of course, I have my personal learning outcomes for the whole program.
What are learning outcomes?
What do you take out of the program? At the end of the year, what have you learned? Learning outcomes are your goals at the beginning of the year, what you want to accomplish by the end.
It's something that's not necessarily stressed enough as it should be, because it's kind of like that aha moment with our case study group where we're like, oh, this is what we want us to learn.
I think that learning outcomes are actually very important. I think the challenge with learning outcomes is figuring out what to do with them. My own view is that learning outcomes are a bit like the melody in jazz. They provide a structure from which you should and can and should be improvising.
Can you tell us how you use learning outcomes in your courses?
The most useful part for me is when I'm designing a course. Learning outcomes give me something to hang my content on.
The instructors refer to these outcomes and say, pay attention to these because this is what we're expecting of you.
We have learning outcomes. I know they're there, but we don't really use them that I know of. So,
Learning outcomes I think are really important because they kind of frame, they establish what the purpose of your course is and what the need is. I think where they become a little bit problematic is when you're using it to define everything in your course. You're using it as a measurement tool. And I haven't really had that experience before until coming here to Royal Roads.
it's different than other schools, and so especially if they're new to the university, they have a hard time kind of wrapping their head around learning outcomes and why we use them and why they should mark towards them rather than just giving students a mark for an assignment or a mark for a class.
Learning outcomes, I've always thought that they are a real challenge and hard to work with. And what I've discovered is that if you make them really clear, they actually make your course so much easier because your assignment links directly to your learning outcome.
I have strong feelings about learning outcomes. I think it should be actually the opposite. You create a space for learning and you see what emerges in that learning space, rather than saying ahead of time, this is what's going to happen in this learning space.
I find it very helpful to have outcomes. I certainly develop outcomes for other programs that I work in, but I certainly don't take them as the Bible. They're a table of contents. That's where my creativity, the interests of the students, current events can get pulled in. So well-designed outcomes should give you that flexibility.
I have definitely seen the learning outcomes in the syllabus and quickly flipped by them and during pre-res, but it's been at this residency piece where I've gone back to see what am I trying to accomplish here, to offer some clarity because they have been linked back to the assignments.
I can grade against the learning outcomes, and the students know that. So each assignment has learning outcomes associated with it, and for each learning outcome, I can assign an equivalent part of the grade.
It also gives us an opportunity to really showcase for employers exactly what our program offers, what our graduates are going to be able to do, what our graduates are going to be able to know.
If well constructed, they can be incredibly useful in guiding learning, can guide assessment,
It can help in self-regulation in terms of guiding your own learning as a learner. Plus, it allows for external validation of a particular competency area where you can go to experts in the field to say, this is what we're seeking to define as an outcome of a learning process. What do you think? So it can be incredibly useful.